What's up guys, this is Jace with TDTV. We're going to start a little bit of a series here, kind of walking you start to finish through making a song. Here at TDTV we're very into music. Me and Cheese, one of our other producers, have been working in production and recording for quite a while. So we just figured we'd take a couple videos out and kind of explain to you from the making of the beat all the way through to mixing and mastering and working with an artist, kind of the process that we go through, kind of some of the steps that we take to get to a final product. So let's get it. The first thing you want to do when you open up any sort of session, be it whether you're using Logic, Ableton, Pro Tools, which is what I use here, the first thing you're going to want to do is set a tempo. If you don't work around a tempo, it's going to be hard to get things synced up. I've went ahead and chosen 145. I've already been messing around with some sounds. That kind of sounds like a good vibe and a good tempo for the kind of beat we're going to be making here. The first thing that you want to do, and this is where I always start here, is with drums. Because especially if you're going to add a bunch of other stuff on top of it, it's a lot easier to add instruments over drums than it is over a click track. So once you have the drums laid down, it's a lot more musical to play to that. And usually what I'll do is I'll just come into Pro Tools. There's this plugin called Structure Free, and I can just come in straight through Pro Tools, go through my big sound library of drum samples, which is another thing. It's super important, especially in hip-hop style music, to have a good arsenal of drum samples. I think we can all agree that drums kind of drive the beat. When you hear something that has drums that aren't exactly sitting right, they sound a little weak, you can kind of tell that it's a little amateur. So finding drums that work well together and drums that are going to kind of push through the mix and kind of let the beat ride are going to be incredibly important. So usually I'll start off by grabbing a kick, and then I'll find a snare that matches. Another good tip here is if you are finding samples that aren't quite what you want, but you like a certain aspect of the sample, you can always layer two samples on top of each other. So for instance, if I liked a certain snare here, say for instance that snare, but maybe it just sounded a little too low, it wasn't exactly what I'm looking for, but I liked a little bit of the sound. It just wasn't all the way there. You can always go grab another snare that has something that the first one didn't, and you can layer those together, kind of making a hodgepodge of the two snares that'll eventually get you the sound you're looking for. But I'm going to get some drum samples here really quick, lay them out into a pretty basic pattern, and we'll check back with y'all once that's done.
A few moments later.
Okay, we've gone through, we've picked out a few drum samples. I'll solo each of those out for you so you can hear them individually. We'll start with the kick. We got a snare. Another great thing to do when you are using hi-hats, especially when you're using samples, is if you use the same hi-hat at the same velocity, it sounds very robotronic. Like, not to pull from Jack Black in School of Rock, but it sounds very robotic. And it's not really the feel you're looking for. Either change up the variation in the velocity, which is how hard you're hitting that sample. Hypothetically speaking, it'd be like hitting a cymbal harder and harder and harder, or use two different hats. And so in this case, I chose to use two different hi-hat samples. Here's the first one. See how that sounds a little robotic? It sounds pretty stagnant. It's the same level on all of them. This is the second hi-hat. Notice neither of those sound good on their own, and that's not super important because it's more about the movement they create when you put them together, and they play off each other pretty well. When you add them back with the kick, the snare, everything else, you get a it's got a little bit of swing to it, a little bit of movement. You don't want just a straightforward beat. No one nods their head to something that's just ones and twos. The next thing that I would recommend doing is going and just finding some instruments that you like. Be it if you play guitar, whether you're a piano player, just go through any software is going to come with a good bit of plugins. If you're in Pro Tools, you'll come down, you'll click on your inserts. I'll go back and redo that for you. Right here, you click on inserts and then come down to instruments. And from there, some of these I have bought, but you get Boom, DB33, Mini Grand, as well as Structure Free, Vacuum, and Expand all included in Pro Tools, and I know in Logic you actually get a lot more, as well as Ableton obviously has their own. But definitely just start messing around. I already did that while we were off camera, and so I found a few things. Also, if you do notice, I've labeled everything. Every instrument track is labeled. You'll thank yourself in the long run when you come to mix the song, if you're not having to re-listen to every single part individually, just to figure out what it is again. It's really simple, but a lot of times I've seen people go through and have 25 tracks in a song and everything's track 1, track 22. You don't know what that is. But the first sound that I found here sounds pretty funky on its own. Not really what you'd think of when you think of hip-hop music. It sounds like something that would be used in like the 1960s or something. But when you work out a melody on it, like that, it sounds a little cooler when you break it up. And so it's one of those things where don't write off an instrument because the first chord you play doesn't sound cool, it doesn't sound like what you're looking for. Try a few different things, try a few different styles of playing a melody, and see where that gets you from there. But here's what I came up with just in messing around with that. Kind of creepy, but you can definitely hear that might be something that you wouldn't have come up with that melody if you were using a different instrument. And that's another cool thing about kind of the way music has gone to being inside the computer. I can sit here and click through different instruments till I find one that works, and I can also have access to different sounds and different instruments that I otherwise wouldn't. Obviously I don't have whatever weird thing this is sitting in my closet that I can just pull out and start playing on, but because of the beauty of in-the-box music creation, we are able to have access to that. The next thing I go to, you kind of got your basics. You got your melody, your drums, and you got your bass. So what I did is I went and found kind of an 808 subtype bass, and I just kind of played out a pattern that followed the basis of the melody. It's good to have a little variation in the bass. You don't want it to just be a stagnant, just drone of bass that doesn't really sound good, and it also doesn't push the hype of the song at all. Give the track some air, so when the bass does come in, it has a little more emphasis and you realize it, as opposed to just having bass every second of the song. But here's the bass line I laid down with the melody. Each one of the bass hits lines up with a kick drum. That is intentional. When you stack a bass with the kick, especially an 808 or a sub-type bass, it kind of adds that emphasis on the first note and kind of adds a little bit of impact to it. With everything, you kind of got this right now. Kicks and the bass line up, the drums kind of add some swing to it. You can tell it's not stagnant, but if you look at it, we're only at 6 tracks, and we're pretty close to being done. You're leaving room for the artist. The artist may lay down his verse, and he may initially say, hey, like, could we add this in this part or this in this part? When he comes in, he's going to have a vision just like you, creating the beat for what he wants the final product to be. So definitely be fluid as you do deal with the artist. The other thing that I added, this just kind of sounded like a beat that could use some choir. And when you deal with choir, it's definitely not something you want to overuse. But the other thing about using especially VST choirs or instrument choirs that are virtual, where you're not actually recording a big group, is to listen to it in the full song before you make a decision on whether it fits or not. Even in this case, when you grab the choir, and you play it by itself, it sounds funky. It doesn't sound human. It doesn't sound like something you'd want. Just give it a quick listen here. But when you play it in the term of the whole mix, it makes a lot more sense. You can kind of see that the choir kind of acts to fill in, kind of like you use hats to fill in the space between kicks and snares. the choir kind of fills in the bass between those melody hits and between the dead parts with the drums. It kind of just starts to glue everything together. It kind of adds another dimension. I did come up with one more melody. This is usually how it goes. As you build on top of things, you'll have a different thing you hear in your head. You'll have a melody, maybe you'll have another drum part that comes up that you think you want to add. And the only other thing that I thought to add was actually a second little flute part. I think we know after Future made his song, everyone was hopping on the flute train, and it doesn't hurt to do that. Found a pretty cool sound. It's not exactly a flute, as you can tell. It's called pan flute, maybe. So we don't exactly know what it is, but it is pretty cool. So it's kind of like a pan flute, more of an ethnic instrument. But when you play the two melodies together, they really play off each other well. If you're going to have two very melodic pieces of music playing at the same time, they need to play off each other and not just copy each other. Otherwise, you're just stacking. You're taking up more of the frequency spectrum, which is going to make it harder to mix. You're going to lose more headroom, but they do play off each other pretty well. So they definitely have, you can kind of tell as one melody is going up, the other one's going down. They're kind of ping-ponging back off each other. That is the whole beat. That's all you need. Don't try to put too much into a beat. I've seen videos on YouTube of people that wind up with 45 tracks just making a beat. So keep it simple. Add what you need and nothing that you don't. So with everything together, this is what we have.
Freestyle, Jace.
Oh, not in this one, Brian. But we will have someone in the next video writing and recording. We'll walk you through the steps of miking an artist, setting levels properly, maybe some tricks that you can do as you do record them, as far as double tracking goes, a few cool techniques with proximity effect, definitely some things you need to have, like a pop filter. We'll go over all of that in video 2. And get you all set up on that. When that video is posted, it'll be somewhere over here next to my head. We'll definitely add an annotation in the video. And when the third section of the video is finished, where we mix and master the final version of this beat with vocals, with everything together, and walk you through a basic process of how to get something you're happy to listen to in your car, that'll be somewhere potentially in this area. We'll see when that happens. This is the first part of a 3-part series. Be sure to comment and subscribe so you stay up to date on every part of this journey as we do walk through making a song together. If you have suggestions, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear your feedback on the way I work. Maybe if there's something I missed that you think is pretty important, let me know. I'm definitely always trying to pick up some new tricks just like you guys. Thank you for watching TD. We'll see you in the next one.